My name is Richard Furrow, and I can say I am cloud hired.
That yes, come and join and get cloud hired. I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
Hey, Go Cloud Architect family. I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired, guys.
So I'll just say I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired thanks to Go Cloud Architects.
It worked for me, and now I'm cloud hired. Because of Google Architect program, I am cloud hired. See!
I am cloud hired. Thank you, Mike and the GloCloud team.
Welcome, everyone. This is Mike Gibbs, and I am here today to help you build your architecture career. Maybe you have a goal of becoming a solutions architect, or a cloud architect, or an enterprise architect, or a security architect. Well, I'm here to help you. I've spent the last 25 plus years in architecture roles, and it's been the most fun job of my life. I spent 20 plus years or 23 years or so above the principal architect level. So I've been there. I've done just about everything you can in architecture. And that's why I want to help you. I've also spent 20 years training people. You can find the people that I've trained or coached over the last 2 decades at companies like Apple and Amazon and Cisco and Google and IBM, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Barclays Bank, JP Morgan Chase Bank, security companies like Palo Alto, Zscaler, Netspoke, and every other prestigious organization you can think of. I've trained people and they're working there. And that's why I'm here to guide you, because I remember when I started my tech career, and I remember when I started it like it was yesterday. I didn't know where to go. I needed a roadmap. There was so much bad information people gave me. I wasted my time on unrelated, wrong certifications. And then as soon as I had a guide, a couple months later, I got my first role as a senior network engineer. 3 months later, I was the lead architect. And within 2 years, I was a principal architect because I knew exactly what to do. And that's why I'm here to guide you. So please bring me any questions you may have. I'd like to let you know about some free things we have going on before we actually do, and other bonuses and specials we have going on. And then I will start answering questions. So tomorrow, between 2 and 4 p.m., we have a security architect webinar, and these are fun. We're going to be live on Zoom. And I'll talk about what is a security architect. I'll talk about what we do. I will talk about all the skills you need for the role, whether they be the critical business skills that you can't do the role without, or the technical skills that you will need to know as well, which again, you can't do the role without. I'll cover exactly what hiring managers are looking for, exactly all the certifications you should do. And it's a free webinar, and it'll be live on Zoom. So you can join us tomorrow. My team just dropped the link inside the chat box. There's also a link to this in the description. And if you're curious about other architecture webinars, don't worry, I'll answer those. I mean, other architecture careers like enterprise or cloud or AI architects, I'm happy to answer those questions as well on those webinars. It's live on Zoom and free. So we'll speak for about 45 minutes, and we'll spend about an hour and 15 minutes doing anything we can. If you're not winning interviews and you want me to diagnose the problem, I'm happy to give you a couple mini interview questions, diagnose the problem, to tell you what to do about it. Not getting resume calls, I'm happy to look at your LinkedIn profile or something like that on these free webinars. Anything we can do to help you. So that's tomorrow. I also want to let you know that for the cloud architect career and the AI architect career, we've got a free guide in the description of this video that'll tell you everything you need to know about what we do and how to become them in skills. And if you maybe want to read that and join me in the webinar tomorrow, it'll be a great experience. And I look forward to meeting you. And also wanted to let people know, for people that know us, that maybe want to participate in one of our architect programs, that we have 50% off for summer savings. We've got a couple days left of summer till the 21st. So we have a summer savings at 50% off of all our training program. So I've done all I can. I welcome you. Please ask questions. If you're having a good time, leave a like. If you're learning something new and you like something, maybe subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of new things. And now, Tyron, backstage, could you start bringing me in the questions? Cloud Doctor, how do you get hired without a previous architect title? You've been in sales for 12 years and currently studying for the AWS Professional. Will this be sufficient? So the answer is no, it won't be sufficient, but yes, you can easily get hired. Now, I can tell you, for an example, I'll use Wallace Agana because he's made a YouTube video with us. He was a person that was a sales rep, spent about 8 months with us, and got hired as an enterprise architect at I think JP Morgan Chase Bank, actually. So, and I can give you many examples of that. Now, I'm also going to tell you, for example, that 50% of all the working enterprise architects in the world don't come from a tech background. So let's talk about what you do need to know versus what you don't need to know. And it really depends on the kind of architect you would like to be. So why don't we do this? Could you tell me what kind of architect you would like to be, Cloud Doctor? Because every architect itself has a different set of skills. I need a different set of skills in a security architect than I would, for example, in an AI architect, or a cloud architect would also need different skills. So could you tell me what you mean by that? What type of an architect job? But I can tell you right now, you're going to need more training. But what you'll need your training in will be very dependent and exactly the set of skills that you'll need. So you want to be a cloud architect, a generalist. Okay, great. So Cloud Doctor, if we look at what we have in cloud computing and what we do as cloud architects, we set up the technology platforms that enable everything that has to happen. So we've got application architects creating we're designing applications, and application developers that are driving applications. We have security people coming in and designing the security architecture, and that's what the security architects do. And then we have security engineers monitoring the systems and building the systems that we actually design. We'll have AI architects that are focusing, say, on the AI strategy, and then again, AI engineers that are going to come and build it. So that's what we're typically talking about here. So what you have to do is you're going to have to pick up the architecture experience. And what is that going to be? Well, from a tech perspective, none of it's going to be covered in your AWS Solutions Architect Professional. For example, in the AWS Solutions Architect Professional, what they will teach you is the name of the AWS services and how to configure those services. But in the architect role, we don't configure any of those services. We can't use those ridiculous marketing names with our clients, because then it sounds like we're biased towards using marketing names. So we're going to call them what they are. We're going to say function as a service for function as a service, application virtualization for application virtualization, a virtual machine for a virtual machine, a container for a container. And we're not going to use silly terms like EC2. We'll talk about a virtual machine. So why do we have to do this is you have to relate to the client, and you have to understand how to move the client's technology to the cloud, knowing when you should move to the cloud, what you should move to the cloud, what you should not move to the cloud. For example, a high throughput workload might cost 10 times more to run it in the cloud. Likewise, a sporadic and more agile workload that needs scales in and scales out, that's got very, very significant variances in what it might do, might actually be cheaper in the cloud. So we have to figure out what we're trying to move, why we're trying to move it, what we're actually gaining. So what that means, Cloud Doctor, is you're going to need to understand the whole entire thing, the network, the data center, and the multi-cloud environment, because no one puts all their eggs in one basket. Now, when I say no one, so between 89 and 92% of enterprises use more than one cloud. So that means 9 out of 10 companies that you could work for are multi-cloud. So you need to have multi-cloud skills. We have to come to the reality that most workloads, half of them don't work in the cloud, and half of what we're doing as cloud architects now is taking people off of the cloud for the things that shouldn't have been placed on the cloud while migrating other workloads to the cloud. So that means you need to understand compute. And that means whether it's a virtual machine, a function as a service, for example, application virtualization, a container, you need to be able to evaluate all those options, understand each option's strengths and weakness, and recommend the one that's best for the business after evaluating the trade-offs between them. Same thing with storage. You have to determine what are the right kind of storage. Where should the storage be located? Should it be located in the data center? Should it be located in the cloud? What kind of storage do we use? Object storage has these strengths, but these weaknesses. Block storage has these strengths and these weaknesses. File storage has these strengths and these weaknesses. So we have to be in that kind of position where we can evaluate them. And the same thing is going to happen with security. You're going to have to really know security. And it's not going to look like anything in an AWS certification where they're going to teach you all these AWS security things. For certain reasons like features and functionality that'll be necessary, you won't be able to use half of those things. Plus the other set of tools that we might teach in an AWS certification are in an AWS only world, which doesn't exist. Most enterprises have 50 to 100 different to 1,000 applications from 50, 100, 150 vendors. So you're going to have to use choices that are going to work on all clouds with all vendors. So that's going to wipe out some of that. You're going to have to learn the same thing with networking. How do you design a wide area network, for example? What kind of wide area network do you choose? Do you choose a SASE line, an IPsec tunnel, an SD-WAN environment, a private line? What are the strengths and weaknesses and trade-offs? So that's more of what we do. Cloud Doctor, why don't you come to our webinars and I'll talk about what we do, the process going from the executive team to find their business needs to translate that and everything that works into to creating an architecture, developing the architecture, creating the governance structure around that. Join me tomorrow. But that's what we need to do. We need to teach you actual architecture. And also there's a document that I wrote there that can be really helpful in the description that says how to become a cloud architect. And then I'll also go over the differences between certification and training, for example. Ashish Pandley, nice to see you again. I haven't seen you in a while. You're currently working as a cloud engineer, but with the growing adoption of AI, how can you integrate AI into your role as a cloud engineer? So Ashish, I know where you're coming from. There's a certification provider, and I've been retraining their students forever because they needed a different set of skills to be hired. And he came up with this AI cloud engineer. I saw another solutions architect come up with it, and here's the reality. If you try to be a cloud engineer and an AI engineer at the same time, you're going to be bad at both. And that's not going to help you at all. When you try to do two different careers and not master either one, because you can't master two careers, you become less good than AI. And when it comes to AI, you'll be replaced because you have to be better than AI. So what I'd like you to do is pick one. Now, if you want to be an AI engineer, take all the knowledge and experience you've worked with the cloud and now think about how to be an AI engineer. I don't need an AI engineer that knows how to set stuff up in AWS and that's it. Because AI is a very high throughput workload. And high throughput workloads are usually much cheaper in the data center. So you've noticed data center spending is going up very quickly here because many organizations are building data centers around this for that particular reason. So if you want to be an AI engineer, train to be an AI engineer, learn what's necessary, which types of languages you're going to code as an AI engineer. Python, R, master is whatever that is going to be specific with the platforms you're using. Really master where those workloads need to be. What workload needs to be in a GPU? What workload really needs to be in a CPU? Really get down and dirty. Understand small language models, large language models. Understand the trade-offs with each and what the functionality could be there, for example. Learn how to optimize accuracy in the system. Master what is necessary for the data hygiene, for example, that needs to occur on the data, what privacy techniques that you may actually need to use. Really master that. And really master the tools that you could be using, whether it's PyTorch, TensorFlow, or some other kind of library, or a standard LLM, or a custom trained LLM. You have to be able to dive deep into that. Now, that way, what you're talking about is you are an AI engineer, which is going to pay you far more than a cloud engineer would. And you don't want to mix up the two jobs together because an AI engineer that's really good is going to get paid here, and a cloud engineer is going to be paid down here. A cloud architect is going to be paid right up there with the AI engineers, but the cloud engineers, no. So you don't want to mix a high-paying job with a low-paying job. Because what happens, you'll get an average paying job. But if you go out there and become a great AI engineer, I mean, the opportunities are incredible. Same thing for a great AI architect, same thing for a security architect. And that's the difference. And why am I saying this? So some roles, Ashish, like a cloud architect, a security architect, an AI architect, an enterprise architect, a sales engineer, a global account manager, a senior leadership, none of these roles can be replaced by AI because we do a lot of managing stakeholders. We do a lot of leadership. We do a lot of sales. We give a lot of presentations to the C-suite and the board. We're leading large teams, but that's, one of those things to really think about. So I want you to think about those roles can't be replaced. But if I have an engineer that tries to do two different things and they try to do two different things well, they're not as good as the AI, and that person does get replaced. And I see it happen all the time. It's the reason we no longer sell cloud engineering programs, and we stopped it 2 years ago, because as much as I love cloud engineers, the engineering field, what you'll see is happening, is not doing well. And if you actually look economically, and Harvard Business Review just posted something, you're seeing a bifurcation in jobs. And the senior roles, whether they be an architect role or a principal engineer, those salaries are going up. But what you're also seeing is people are not hiring the more junior level, the more I know a little bit about a lot of things kind of people, because they're not typically as good AI. So that's what I would do, is I would master at that. And notice a lot of what I actually talked about, except for the languages, was all the judgment, the wisdom, the ability to understand the impact of one change into another system. And I focused more on that because we're 2-3 years away from AI writing all the code in the world, potentially 5 years away, or at least enough of it. Look at the big companies like Google, 25+%, Microsoft 25%, Meta 25% of their code with Google. Salesforce just fired 40% of their back-end people, typically mostly back-end, mostly the engineers, because they're using AI to do back-end things. Now, what do the companies do the day later? They hire sales engineers, solutions architects, and sales reps. So I hate it. But I want to keep you safe if you want to stay in engineering. If you want to stay in engineering, you got to be the best of the best, and that takes laser-like focus. You're also interested in moving into a security-focused role with AI. However, you're unsure what the demand for security will decrease in the future. How can your expertise be security with AI? Again, the cybersecurity shortages are among the greatest in the entire world. The World Economic Forum is typically looking at the threat to humanity and the financial threat, which is in the tens of trillions of dollars. So huge issues of that that they're going on. So there's a global shortage of 5.5 million people in cybersecurity. And typically speaking, for every 100 positions that are open, we can only fill 74 of them, leaving 26 open. Now, again, it's going to be the same thing. If you try to combine security with AI, you're trying to do two people's jobs, and you're not going to be good at anything unless you focus exclusively on securing AI systems, in which case then you become a specialist and an expert. But anytime you try to do two careers, it's why you don't see a cardiologist and a neurosurgeon in the same person. The neurosurgeon earns more for what they do. They're not going to moonlight as a cardiologist and earn half. You pick the career you love. You do the career you love. So it's the same thing. But remember, in security, what are your options out there? You're in a security architecture role, which cannot be replaced by AI. You're not touching the technology, and you're earning far more. Now, when it comes to a security engineer, we have to look at which engineers. Now, the penetration testers, the ethical hackers that walk in and talk to people and use social engineering to try to trick the people into giving them things, in addition to using the tools in the background, those people we will always need because they can think and they can act like a hacker. But someone that just knows a bunch of scripts on Kali Linux, we don't need because we can automate that. So in the offensive security world, the ethical hacking world, there are lots of jobs. Same thing in security. We can automate a lot of the stuff that's going on in the SOCs right now. Much of it's getting automated. But what can't we do? We can't find enough of the people that can create a security strategy or really protect an organization from harm. So again, dive deep. Not so much the how-to. AI is great at the how-to, but the why. What is the impact of one change to another system? If I have a network engineer, for example, and they're looking at an OSPF domain and they're thinking about LSA flooding and they're thinking, where can my summarization points be, for example? But it's all going into the deep. So you have to be able to outthink AI, which means you need a lot deeper knowledge, which means you really need a big focus. But there's no security decreasing in the past. It's only increasing. There's only more and more cyber threats every day. Every new thing that goes online is a new threat, and it's much harder to protect things in a cloud computing environment than the data center, which is why we've had to move from, say, defense in depth, which was fairly good in the data center, to more of a zero trust. So we need security people desperately. But like I said, be a master of something or be replaced by AI by trying to spread yourself too thin. But, there's lots of AI in security, AI in the Siemens source systems, AI in the next generation firewalls, AI in the context-aware IAM strategies. So we are using AI in security, but the focus of a security person is security. Like I said, unless you wanted to become a security architect that only focuses on securing AI systems. Now, that'll be a hard job to get because not that many people are looking for it because that generally falls under the security. But if you can actually find those jobs, it'd be a nice niche. Hope that helps, Ashish. Tune Hughes, any suggestions to determine if you'd like being a security architect or a general cloud solutions architect? So yes. So I can tell you how you think. When I was a kid and I walked into a building with my parents and there'd be some security person, I remember even at 5 years old, Daddy, look, this person has a security weakness here. We could go in this way. We could evade this way. And my parents are like, shh, you don't want to get us in trouble here in this building. But I always thought that. And as a kid, I had to learn martial arts. I had to learn every kind of defense. And I always, for my life, found it interesting to determine, which angles you could come in and where were the places you would park and where you'd put camera angles and how you would protect things. And I did a lot of bodyguard training in my youth as I was a paramedic paying my way through school because it was just interesting to me. My brain loved security. And then when I got into networking, and all I could think of about is, wow, we got to protect this here. There's an ingress point here. That's a weakness. How do we protect this? And my brain just used to think about that. And I love it. And truth be told, after even being one of the first CCIUs in the world did networking, I have to say that my two favorite areas of most fun are security and enterprise architecture. And I will tell you why. Because I love protecting things. I love defending things. And I just like that. And the security architect in me is all about defense. So I love that. And I still get excited by it. And if you ever hear me speak, even though I'm an enterprise architect, you're going to hear way too deep of security coming out of my mouth or networking for where I am in my world. But it's because I just am too infatuated with it. So that's why I would pick that. Have I been working on AI since 2001? Yes. Does AI interest me from what it can do from an enterprise architect perspective? But learning it and studying that's not me at all. So I wouldn't go there because it's not what I love. Now, if you are the person that likes to manage a larger organization and be the generalist and be the person that creates the team and be the person that builds the team and guides the team along the way, that is the perfect place to be a cloud architect, which is a very generic role, or an enterprise architect. And these are, again, big roles. Now, the solutions architect is an entry-level role, which is why a lot of people I train, like Yvonne, for example, started there, or Victor started there, or Vladimir started there, or Pierre started there. It's a fairly entry-level role in the world of architect roles. So, again, that's just basically the cloud architect role, but focusing on a single provider, like a doctor that can only prescribe one medications from one company versus the cloud architect that can use every tool available. So, kind of hope that would help. But it's what you have to be passionate about, because the key here is you have to be great. You have to be intellectually curious. You have to want to learn. You have to want to get better. And you can only do that in something that you actually enjoy. So there's demand for everything. The cloud architect, the enterprise architect and the security architect are among the hardest to fill jobs in the world, at least in the technology world. So there's a demand and there's no supplies. Just do what you love and then you'll be very happy. Great questions today. Please keep on asking them. Hi, Dingleman. It's good to see you. Hi, Mike. How do you handle all the moving parts in regards to building a security architecture? Keeping up with the stakeholders is definitely a job itself. So, Dingleman, I love to see you here. I remember when we found you. I remember when you got that great first cybersecurity engineer job at that great company. And now you have your first security architect job. And remember, I always talked about soft skills and leadership skills and finesse and stakeholder management. I guess now you're in the role and you can let me know if this is that you're spending a lot of time in conversations. And how do you keep up with stakeholders? Well, I actually like to build myself a little stakeholder plan. And first in that is where I identify the key stakeholders, typically in the early phases of our enterprise architecture. And then I typically determine what each stakeholder actually needs. And then I typically write my own little map of which stakeholders like which other stakeholders and which ones don't. So sometimes if I have to seat people at a table, I might know how and where I might need to do that. And we get all this information from body language and tone of voice. And I try to have a meeting whenever possible with the stakeholders periodically, either in person if there's going to be like a large number of them, or at least if they're scattered throughout the world in some form of video communication thing periodically. And I constantly am looking constantly out there. I like to stop periodically, and if I can, take people to lunch or take people to drinks or dinner, or really get to know those stakeholders. Because at the end of the day, when you have that stakeholder knowledge, they will come to you and you will learn things that you wouldn't otherwise. But also they will give you information which will most likely help you with your next RFP and your next architecture that you're going to design. But it is really a big thing. So find a way to get organized. And Dingelman, what I do from the enterprise architecture perspective always helps me get organized. The first thing the question in any architecture I ask is, what exactly is the goal? How do you define success, and how would you measure it? So when we know that, we know what to measure. But I build myself, I tend to use like a somewhat TOGAF type methodology, whether I call it TOGAF 10 or not. It's like that, where I start with the executives, figure out what they're doing, scope the architecture, and identify those stakeholders. And I build myself a stakeholder map. I also map out the business architecture, and I also map out the key business processes and key value streams along the way. Now, that's going to be critical for we enterprise architects that are going to tune or optimize that. But even the security architects, when you've got that down and you know how your data is flowing, how your applications are flowing, what the network actually looks like and the underlying technology, it becomes real easy. And that way, we used to call it get smart at Cisco. You could look at it fairly quickly. You could really memorize what you needed to. You could research those things that you didn't know, which we called the getting smart process, which would happen with every client, because every client would want something new, at least on my team, that never been done before, things like that. So it was all, what can we do? So in those cases, you really get this documentation. And you really try to write some notes on, I spoke with this person on this day, they said that to me. And I try to keep a note journal. I have little folders all over my environment that I keep. And that way, when I want to go back, I can look at the notes that I took on that person. And I can compare, and I go back and say, they said they didn't want to do this on this date and this time. Wait, my team's looking in this direction. Well, maybe we don't go down that direction, or I go back to this person and say, realistically speaking, I know you didn't want to go down this path, but after evaluating this options is probably the best. Would you like to consider it further after hearing these challenges, or do you still want to go down this path? And I'll have my team work around another one. But that's why I keep such detailed records on that. And that's what I would do. Dingo, if you want to play or brush up, just come back to class. We're happy to brush some of these things up on stakeholder management with you anytime you want. I'm just very proud of you, and you've done so well, and I'm so happy to see you here. But yes, stakeholder management by most is considered the most critical part of the architecture role. Adhish, you're currently working in IAM. Great. You'd like to move into a security architect role, designing and building systems. What steps should you take to grow your technical skills and build credibility? Okay, so we have one challenge there. Architects don't build systems. We design systems. Now, design engineers might build something, but architects don't. Now, you have to really look at what we actually do as security architects. And this is why we architects get paid so much. And this is why we can't be replaced by AI. So we, as security architects, go to our clients and we have to ask them questions like, what are your assets? And figure out what the risk to those assets are. Figure out what their employees look like, figure out what their customer base looks like, and figure out where they're going as a first step. So that's going to take a lot of discovery information. Now, at some point there, we're going to have to quantify what is the risk, which basically means using some basic simple financial calculations to be able to look at the assets, to look at what would happen if those assets were attacked or compromised in some way, and what would be the impact on the business that year. And that way we can calculate annual risk. And after we've calculated the annual risk, we can then translate that into a risk mitigation plan. Maybe the risk gets transferred to, say, an insurance company. Maybe the risk gets mitigated with a technical control like a firewall. Maybe the risk gets reduced by a administrative control or a rule. So it's then about upcoming to us is to basically figure out what the risk is, quantify it, convince the client to invest in whatever is necessary to mitigate that risk with our solution. So that's one of the things we're going to do, which is risk management. Now, at the same time, we're going to have to analyze what their buildings look like, the ingress and egress points in their building, the way they do fire suppression in that building. For example, the wrong kind of fire suppression could be dangerous to technology. we're going to have to look at, say, what's going to take from a business continuity perspective. Do we need generators? Do we need fuels? How do we get that stuff? If something happens, where do we operate offsite? How long do we need? Can we be down? What's the maximum we can be down? Where do we place the backup systems and things like that? So that's going to be a lot of it. That kind of disaster recovery planning, business recovery planning, physical security kind of planning. Now, we're going to have to ask a lot of stakeholders to change, because what's necessary is we're going to get stakeholders buy-in to get them to support a new architecture. Anytime we have a new architecture, there'll be a cultural change. There'll be new processes for people to work. There'll be new applications. We will have to provide training for the organization and create marketing campaigns around change. So we will be dealing with a lot of these change things. Other things that we will be doing as an architect will be writing policies and procedures and guidelines and incident response plans. So you'll have to know how to do that kind of planning. Now, you will be leading proof of concepts, meaning you will determine what a proof of concept is, how to scope the proof of concept, and then engineers are going to go build it and test it. So you're going to have to define what is success, figure out what those key success factors that actually are, and make sure you can do that. You'll have to build a business case around security and show people that security costs less than it costs less to secure it or remediate it or protect it in some way than the actual risk is. Because if it costs $1 billion to protect $1 million asset, it's not worth protecting it in the same way. So why did I say these, Adadish? Because the majority of the skills for the security architect are actually business skills. The majority of them are business skills. And I can tell you that one of the biggest reasons people fail a security architect interview is they approach it like an engineer. And that is one of the most common reasons. So I can tell you and show you the difference between an engineer's answer and an architect's answer. If I ask an engineer, could you talk to me about this firewall? I don't care. Say a Palo Alto firewall. What that engineer will tell me is, how do I configure that firewall? They will tell me the maximum performance they can do. They will tell me the features and functionalities that I can do with that firewall and how to integrate it. That's an engineering answer. Now, by comparison, the architect will come in and say, Ms. Client, you've had two architectural options that you can use to protect your website. One is to use the AWS WAF system. It's very simple and elegant to use. It's immediately available for you. We don't need a lot of people that are highly trained into using that. And it works as a fairly decent web application firewall for most things. Now, let's talk about the weaknesses of the AWS web application firewall. It works with known attacks. So it works like a traditional firewall. It expects at layer 7, and you can even pay an additional fee to get signature detection. Signature detection is after an attack has occurred, the signature updated, and the firewall can do it. But can a business afford to not have protection for those day zero type attacks? If that's the case, a business might use a next generation firewall from, say, a Palo Alto, even a WAF version, or a Cisco, or a Fortinet, and their work a little different. They do everything that the AWS firewall does, everything, but they also have behavioral analysis and adaptive capabilities, so they can actually find a threat in real time and potentially stop it, to stop something that it's never seen and potentially save your organization from harm. We therefore believe that by investing an additional $3 million annually on these firewalls, we can reduce your risk by $96 million, and we think that's a good trade. That's what you're going to have to do to sound like to build credibility, and that's what you're going to have to be. Adadish, why don't you come to our How to Become a Security Architect webinar, and I will go over a list of the business skills, the tech skills, exactly what we do in this job, and then how to stand out and get hired. Because if you're thinking technical skills, you're making the largest mistakes that most people actually make. And let me actually explain to the point that I've had security engineers with 10 plus years experience, 20 years experience, that I have to train to be security architects. And guess what? Well, it took Wallace Agana 6 months to go from sales rep to enterprise architect. And while it took Coyote about 8 months from college student to hired by AWS as a solutions architect, and while it took me about 8 months to train Emmanuel M over in Manchester and get him hired as a security architect, it takes me specifically at least as long to train the engineer. And it's not that I don't love engineers, but engineering is different than architecture. And it typically takes me about a year, typically a month or two longer to take that engineer to stop thinking like an engineer to actually train them to think like an architect. And then years later, that actual engineering expertise does come in handy. But this is not an engineering role. There's nothing like an engineering role. So if you go too technical, what's going to happen? You'll be interviewed and you'll be told that you're too technical. And I'd say of the 6,000 interviews I've done, about 1,000 of them, where the panel or the people would say the person is just too technical for the role. And it's not that they had too much technical knowledge. It was that they framed the technical as engineering, how to the box itself, as opposed to what can the box enable? How does the box reduce risk? How did the box lead to a cohesive strategy for the organization? So please come to that. I'd love to speak to you on the webinar, and we'll get deeper into this, because this is the best job ever. But I don't want to see you spend an extra 6 years to get there and go in the wrong direction for the next 6 years, which I see it every day. Cloud computing. Which of our architect programs would I recommend for an intermediate DevOps engineer? Cloud computing, and I mean this sincerely, I'm much less concerned about what you've done in the past, and I'm much more concerned about what you would like to do in the future. Because each day you've got to wake up. Look, you know, in my youth, I was a paramedic firefighter. And I did that for 2 jobs full time while I went to school to become a nurse. Now, I became a nurse and said, I respect nurses very much. And I said, this is the worst job. I can't imagine ever doing it for more than a week. So I think I spent about 2 weeks as a nurse and went straight back to school. I went to become a nurse practitioner, studied internal medicine, had my own office, we had 2 different practices we were running. I was running one of the practices, and I loved tech. Now, what it wasn't tech itself. I wasn't in love with computers. I was in love with networking. So I spent the next 9 months and became a network engineer. I became one of the first Cisco certified internet experts in the world, and I did it because I loved it. It was my passion. So are you more passionate about security? If you are, the security architect program. If you wake up and you're excited by walking into the business and coordinating with the C-suite and the board and the key executives and optimizing that organization's business processes, meaning the way the company does things, optimizing their business architecture, and then optimizing their technology architecture at the same time, then you want to be an enterprise architect, and it is a great job. If you love cloud computing and want to decide hybrid multi-cloud architectures, which is what everybody's doing now, you would love, and you love to focus on cloud technologies, then you would love being a cloud architect. And if your focus is on AI and all you want to do is live, eat, and breathe and design AI systems, I would tell you to be an AI architect. And why am I saying that? Because it's not what you used to do. What you're going to find is there is a huge difference between DevOps engineering and architecture. About 80% different. So even, let's say, if you knew cloud computing and maybe you could become a cloud architect in, say, 9 months, even if it took you 10 months to do a different architecture role, but it was the one you wanted and the one you're interested in, it's going to make you happy, that is the one I want you to pick. And if you want to come and speak live on our architecture webinar tomorrow, please, it's on Zoom. I'd love to talk to you, but I want you to like your job. You know, when I was a firefighter paramedic, I really, hold on. And so even if it's a network DevOps engineer, it really doesn't matter to me. I can appreciate the networking background, but you still could do any of these that you actually want. That's really what I want. What is going to make you happy? Because when I had that nursing job, and as soon as I got out of school and was a registered nurse, I had a bachelor's degree in nursing. And I did that first day in the emergency department, which is the job they don't give to people without experience, but they hired me anyway because I was competent. And I hated it. I mean, I couldn't imagine how I was going to live a life like that. Now, I'm grateful for everybody who could, but I couldn't imagine it. And because of that, I did something different. And I don't want you to have a job that you don't like. When I left, I did 3 months as a network engineer. And quite frankly, I did it. I was a senior network engineer. It's when I did my CCIE. It's the number 7417. And I was interested in it. And I kind of love that networking thing. But once I saw that I could use the network to solve real world problems, I was instantly in an architecture role. And that was the first time I didn't work. And I haven't worked a day in my life since I became an architect. I put in a lot of hours, but I've met people in every part of the world. I've met people, whether it's in Asia, the Middle East, South America, Canada, all over Europe. I built friendships for life and relationships for life, and I really enjoyed all my time as an architect. But I now enjoy the enterprise architect world, which is basically an executive role, which is what I'm doing as a CEO these days. Still an architect, it's always part of me, but you have to do what you love. Just find something you love. Any of the architecture programs we have will be great for you. Pick the one you love most, master that, and realistically speaking, you'll have no competition out there because almost no one knows architecture. So it's a great place to be. Love the question. I hope to get to see you in the webinar tomorrow. So what do you need to be in order to the role into secure AI systems? You need to be a security architect. Security architects secure everything, including AI systems. AI people know how to make it. Security people know how to secure it. How many years would it take to become a solution architect with an IC2 entry-level cybersecurity certificate, working on a roadmap, hand orange, colored eyes? So it takes me about a year to train someone to be an architect. But now I tell you, if I do it in about a year, that's me basically taking a lifetime of learning and boiling it down into a year. And what I mean by this, the way we do it, Jose, so I don't know if you have any degrees. So I can tell you I've got 2 master's degrees as well as a bachelor's degree. So that's 8 years of college. Now, I could tell you, I really only got about a year's worth of valuable education out of those 8 years. The rest of it was wasted fluff. So you can take that, what we do is we kind of take that 6 kind of years of college worth of things. We remove everything that's unnecessary and train you on exactly the things that you need to know, and only that. And it takes us about a year. But Jose, what I really want you to understand is there's nothing in a certification by itself that will teach you architecture. So I have a 5-step process to basically train people. It's the process I find use for me. It's the process I use for my students. And the first phases are this. 1, master the career as if you're as good as the top 25% of the people working in the career. You have to do that for no one to care about your experience. And we can easily do that because we use principal architects and above to teach for the most part. Now, the second thing after you have all the skills for the job is now you have to be what the hiring manager wants. Upwards of 89% of people are not hired because they're not what the hiring manager wants. So that's 9 out of 10. So phase 1 is to master the career. Phase 2 is to be what the hiring manager wants. Third thing is to actually build a real world portfolio to prove the world that you can do the job. So for example, my students, when we train, they do architecture projects. So they will create architectural artifacts. Your architecture portfolio should have things like security policies you've potentially written, reference security architectures for maybe a demilitarized zone, blueprints for, say, zero trust architectures, blueprints for various customer IAM strategies versus traditional IAM strategies, security thought leadership, those kind of things. Because that's what we do as architects. You have to have that. Those 3 things come before any certification ever. Now, when we deal with security architects, when we're done that, we train them in the only 3 certifications in the entire world that mean anything in security: the CISSP, the CCSP, and the CISM. Now, Jose, why do we do those certifications after the first 3 phases? Because the certifications will get you an interview for a job, but they will never get you hired for any real job. Only the CCIA is the only certification in the world that's enough to get hired for a real job, assuming you've got good soft skills by itself. So that's why we do these things there. And why do we do that after? Because you're not going to get a job unless you have all those first 3 things first. So they come before the certifications. When you're done those certifications, that's when you have to tune your resume, optimize your LinkedIn profile. Why? Because most resumes that come to me to look at when I try to hire an architect look like an engineering resume. So we toss them out because we want an architect, not an engineer. So we have to tune the resume. We have to teach you what to put on LinkedIn and what not to put on. And here's the reason why. 95% of recruiters source their candidates on LinkedIn, and they don't spend more than 7.4 seconds on a resume. So you're going to have that right LinkedIn profile. We'll teach you what to get off of LinkedIn, because a lot of people have things, for example, on LinkedIn that make it that they can't be hired, what should be on, and it's a real grooming process to really do that. And then if it's with us, we teach you and prep you for the interview, because most people fail the interview because of poor interview skills and not knowing how to answer questions. So we train that. We can do that in about a year, typically speaking. But when people train with us, we keep them in the program until they're hired. But it takes us about a year. But that's about what it's going to take you to get there, to do that, to become an architect. If you want to come tomorrow, I'll talk about the 100% of the exact skills you need to have, and it'll be fun. And you can come off mute, and it's on Zoom. So love to meet you personally and dive deeper. But that's typically what it takes. It could take a year with the perfect training. If you tried to do this on your own, it would take many, many, many years. And Jose, realistically speaking, there's 3 careers you can't figure out how to do on your own. And I'll tell you why. You can't figure out how to become an airplane pilot on your own, because if you take off and land incorrectly, which most likely you would do if you've never flown a plane, there's no second chance to do that because the plane crashes. The next thing you can teach yourself is a role like architecture, but I'm going to call it medicine. Because if you don't know how to do surgery, you can't do it on an experiment. You can't start giving pills to people and figuring out what happens. So you can't learn medicine. Now, the key with architecture is you have to learn how to ask the right questions, how to figure out who the stakeholders are, how to elicit information from them, how to read the verbal and nonverbal information, and then know how to create a strategic blueprint, know how to sell that blueprint to the executives, know how to get the executives and buy-in and support to actually pay for it, create a team and lead a team. Now, those are things typically you need to be trained in. And that's good news. And you know why? Because anybody can teach themselves how to code, but nobody can teach themselves how to be an architect, which is why we get into perfect supply and demand curve for architect, because there's no one out there that can do it. And guess what? There's a huge demand for them. So I kind of hope that helps. But come to the webinar tomorrow. You'll get a bigger concept of exactly what you would need to do. And then that way you'll know, do you get some skills from an MBA program? Do you get them from us? Do you get an executive coach? Do you get them from us? But at least you'll know what you need to do. So I want you to get this job. It is a great job. Average pay is about $229. A principal security architect, if you deal with any major vendor, is about $350 plus. So these are great jobs. I want you to get one, but you have to have the skills for these, and you have to, typically speaking, be taught. But come and I'll explain to you why. Do I feel like the AI will replace this job in 5 years? No. So if you actually look at my publications, and if you go to my website, you'll see, and I've been everywhere from CIO Magazine to Forbes to Investors Business Daily, Data Center Magazine, DevOps, Tech Republic, Tech Radar, everywhere. 2 years ago, I had said, warning, everybody, warning, get out of engineering. And I said, engineering is going to be replaced by AI. We were so worried about it, we stopped selling our cloud engineering program because I didn't want to train anymore. And I said then, I want everybody to move into a role that includes architecture, sales engineering, and leadership, because those roles can't be replaced by AI. So why can't any architect be replaced by AI? AI can do stuff, but AI can't do the following: perform an impact analysis of a change in the system to what's impact on the other. AI cannot walk into a client and convince the C-suite and the board to spend $1 billion on technology. AI cannot lead a 50-person architecture team. AI is not going to build the business case. AI cannot create the cultural change around a new architecture where we have to change the way people do things and the culture and the training programs that are necessary for it. AI can't lead or exercise influence or do any of the things. So that's why it's there. In fact, as it turned out, if you actually looked at the World Economic Forum things, they map identically, and I mean identically, to the architect role. The things they said were the skills of the future were things like analytical thinking, which we do as architects every day. Remember, AI makes hallucinations with incomplete information. Our job as architects will most likely always have incomplete information, but we have to make a decision or recommendation based upon what we have. So we're safe there. People and talent management. World Economic Forum's list of 2030. The architect is constantly managing. Leadership and influence in the World Economic Forum, skills of the future. Architect is leading a team that's influencing stakeholders into spending. So as you look at all the skills in the future, creative thinking, again, another one of them, architects are creatively constantly solving business problems. So if you look at the World Economic Forum, Future of Jobs 2030 report, every skill they list there is exactly an architect skill. And it's because of the work we do, which is more coordination, facilitation, leading, and sales, which is why we can't be replaced by AI. So that's why I've recommended it for years. That's why you can look at the wide variety of posts. That's why you can see we stopped selling our engineering program, and it was a good program for us. But I couldn't sell people on a career that I didn't believe would exist in the future, so we decided to cut it early. And quite frankly, anybody that we had in our cloud engineering program, after we let them stay in it for as long as they wanted until they were hired, we gave them free access to our solutions architect program, because our cloud architect program, because I wanted everybody prepared for the future. So the architect role is safe, and it's safe, and it's safe, and it's safe for a long time, until they actually have AI that can potentially think and reason and do all the things people can. But it's nowhere close to that for a decade, maybe, and it's questionable whether that's even truly possible. Great question. Cloud Doctor, you've heard of a lot of people going to solutions architect interviews and they were told they're too technical. Isn't technical a good thing? Actually, Cloud Doctor, let's talk about what too technical means. And I see it all the time. I don't know, maybe you've been on a panel. Maybe that's why you put this in right after you heard me say that. The panel, at least probably 1,000 panels where people said the person is too technical. So it's not about too technical. It's about not business enough. And let me explain. Some people see the technology at them as the real issue. Ooh, it's AI is new and exciting. I want to learn it. That is the engineer. Now, by comparison, some people see AI and they're like me, and they say, wow, look at a world where the AI can write all the software. So we don't have to worry about software development costs anymore. We can do things immediately. All I have to do is talk to my computer. You know, I can use this AI to analyze my mail and send me alerts for anything that's critical to make sure that when I get through it to the day that I prioritize the most important things. You know, AI can enable me to forecast better by mining through large amounts of data so I make better, more profitable decisions in the future. Oh, the AI is really good with that. You know what? We can use AI to create more automated trading systems to trade stocks or crypto or currencies or whatever it is that we want to trade. And we can do it with AI, and we can increase our accuracy, and we can put the odds in our favor. So some people they wanted to know that the person didn't talk about the tech for the sake of the tech. They talked about what the tech could actually do in terms of transformation. So I'll give you 2 examples. Now, I worked at 2 companies in my networking days. These 2 companies were fierce competitors. And the first company that I worked for was Riverstone Networks. And when I worked for Riverstone Networks, they had some of the most scary, smart engineers I have ever seen in my entire life. I mean, freakishly smart geniuses. Everybody that was there. I mean, it was incredible. And here's how they dealt with. We have a solution here. We've got the router. Our router is faster than the rest of the routers. We've got these additional security features that no one else has, and our routers are faster. No, when I worked for them, every time we did a technical comparison, we'd always beat the competition in the comparison, and we always lost the deal. And I remember the sales engineers, including the principal sales engineer, saying, "But we won technically." And then me and the VP of sales were saying, yeah, but we lost the deal. How do we survive as a company losing deals? Now, by comparison, I joined Cisco months later. And when I joined Cisco, instead of talking about what the box what could do, we talked about what the box would enable for that company. This box enables faster networking speeds by 5 times what you had before. Now, this means we can enable video conferencing between your offices to cut down on your travel expenses. This means we can get you in a face-to-face room with a decision maker faster. Instead of you necessarily having to be on a private plane for 12 hours at $15,000 an hour, you can have someone come into the local office where we've got this telepresence thing, and we can meet that person immediately and increase the velocity of things. Now, additionally, we can now consolidate your voice all onto this single network. And by doing so, we can cut out your long distance costs. And by increasing the reliability of your network, you'll be able to do more things with your network. We can offer you new revenue opportunities and help you explore how you can do that. Now, Cisco sold that box every time. And why is it? Is Cisco sold architectures, Riverstone sold boxes. Cisco sold solutions to problems, Riverstone sold tech. So you can be a deeply technical person, like a CCIE in networking. And instead of someone saying, Mike, could you talk to me about what OSPF is? For example, that would be a great question. Now, the network engineer would say OSPF is an interior gateway protocol, specifically a link state protocol that uses the Dijkstra algorithm for intra-area stuff, but it uses a distance vector like flooding mechanism of the LSAs in between areas. Now, in OSPF, we have LSAs, but these are called link state advertisements, where the routers advertise the state of their links. And I could go on and go on and go on. Now, believe me, I can go just as technical as any network engineer in the world with that. But if I did that, nobody's going to be impressed in the boardroom. Now, if I said, well, OSPF is one of your routing protocols, and we recommend it for the following reasons. First, it works on every major router in the world. So we love that you're using Cisco now. It's a great product. But if you ever wanted to work with Arista or Juniper or someone else by using something open, it'll work everywhere. So that'll cut your vendor lock-in, and that'll reduce your risk of technical debt and such, of route redistribution or other challenges later. At the same time, by using this, we can find and detect failures quicker than what you're usually using, which means we can greater availability, which means more revenue to you for your systems, which means this and this. All of a sudden, it's an architect. So the focus of the architect is always business strategy and business optimization. If the person gives the answer about the tech and goes down a tech deep dive, they come across as an engineer. And then after that, what we ultimately do is we start coming, and they don't look like an architect, and they don't be brought back. It's not that the technical depth isn't a good thing. It is a good thing. It's how they actually do the technical depth. Great question. If you've got any questions, please bring them in. I want to do anything I can to help, but I can't help you if you don't ask questions. So please bring me any questions you want. Abdul, you have a decade of experience as a software engineer. Since you're naturally introverted and not comfortable speaking in public, is it still possible for you to become a cloud architect? The answer is yes. Now, I'll let you in on the secret. I've kind of let the secret slip in a couple of weeks ago. I am an introvert. And in fact, there's a video of Alvin DaCosta. He's one of the VPs over in NVIDIA. He and I have been friends together. We basically came up through the leadership ranks together. At one point, I worked for him. At one point, I was more senior than he was more senior. And we were really good friends, and we supported each other's careers forever, and I highly respect him. And on that, you can see that on this YouTube channel, Alvin said, I'm the new Mike when you used to look and sound like an introvert, where we'd have to go to a Cisco thing, there'd be a sales thing, and I would get myself a nice Macallan 18 or a nice glass of wine, hide in a corner, sip my scotch, and be very, very happy, because that's me. I'm an introvert. But the thing is, over time, I learned to give more presentations. With each presentation came more comfort. I got coached on giving presentations, and I got better at it. And at some point, it just became normal to me. I'm giving another presentation. Now, I will tell you, during the transition, it's going to be a little uncomfortable. Well, because you're doing things that scare you, which is always uncomfortable. But you do it enough, at some point it becomes normal. It's like the person that wants to do a pull-up and they can't do it. And at first they can't go anywhere, and then they can go to there, and then all of a sudden they go to there, and then all of a sudden they go there, and then one day it's just normal for them. So that's the kind of thing. That first one's hard. But once they have that first pull-up, a second, a third, and fourth, next thing you know, they're doing 30 in a row. And it's no big deal for them, at least if they keep training at it each day. But, that's all we're talking about. So, of course you can. We just learn new skills. Go out there, get out of your comfort zone. And that's actually one of the things that I like to do. I like to do things that I am not good at or that I'm a little more concerned to do, because I view it as a way to try to learn how to better be more balanced. Maybe work around some other things, but if you do it enough, you'll be comfortable with it. And that's really the key. So just go out there and do it. Don't let any fear hold you back. I mean, at the end of the day, when we basically are in our last breath, do you want to have the life that you wanted, or do you want to actually be just too afraid to go out there and get it? And I can remember I was a kid at the school dances. I was always afraid to ask someone out, to dance with me. What happens? And I was afraid to dance in public. What happens if they see me? And then I got a little older and I was like, wait, this is crazy. What's the worst thing that can happen? This one doesn't go well. I get a no. Maybe the next one's a yes. And as soon as I had that attitude, I met my wife. We've been married 30 years. And that's the key. Just go out there, do something, and keep at it until you have your goal. And don't let anything stop you. But you can definitely do it, Abdul. You can definitely do it. Louis Lobo. Hi, Mike. You're currently self-studying for the CISSP certification, having Cisco security certification, using Cisco products, and designing customer networks. Are you doing the right thing? Well, it all depends on your goal. So if your goal is to be an engineer and a design engineer, sounds like you're probably doing a great thing. Now, if your goal is to be a security architect, you're probably going to have to do some different things along the way. You're going to have to, and I can tell you, for example, so when I was at that engineering level, what did it take, and what did it really take? So I had a sales engineer job for a short period of time. I was a principal architect, and I was a sales engineer, and I saw some big, juicy director level architect job. And right before that, my manager had said to me, Mike, do you know the difference between a $150,000 sales engineer solutions architect versus a $300,000 enterprise architect? And I had to tell me. And he said, Mike, it's related to the change that you can actually create in your clients. It's the bigger the change, the bigger the impact you can make, the more you can earn. He said, so you give a good presentation, but I need you to give a great presentation. He said, you and your team, you were able to close $40 million this year. But what if you could close $400 million instead in terms of deals? He said, right now, I've seen you lead a team of 3-4 people, and they are rock stars. But what about when I need you to lead a team of 50, where you're on a project and you need a team of 50 or 100? How are you going to do that? How are you going to scale? And then my manager said something about, the last time we were all at Morton's, I noticed you used the wrong fork. He's like, we're going to have to straighten that out and fix that out. So I started reading books in the exact form, the exact this. I took golf lessons, and, that moved me into that big role. But it was a process of an MBA for business acumen, an executive coach, executive writing courses, executive presence training, public speaking training, and much of it. And the point is, that's what it took to get me from there to that level. So really want to know what your actual goal is, but you can't get an architecture job by getting certifications. Now, if you did the CCDE, the Cisco Certified Design Expert, that is fairly similar to what we do. Now, that certification might get you 85% of the way to an architect role, assuming you had the extra business acumen from, say, an MBA program or a program like ours where we would teach it. But that would get you closer. But CISSP is a great certification. It's going to get you a lot of interviews, but you have to learn the architecture somewhere. You're not going to get that in a certification. Can one train for security architecture with the CCNA? Absolutely not. So if we really want to look at security architecture, it's a lot that you need to learn. And effectively, almost none of it's going to be covered in the CCNA. So let me give you a couple minutes of a sample. I got a few minutes that we can spend on this. So let me really talk to you about, the majority of what we're actually doing in the role. kind of help understand why you can't do this from a certification. So typically speaking, what we do is we go to the client, we work with their executive team, we figure out what their assets are, we figure out, have they been breached, how many times they've been breached, what have you. Now, at this point, we have to learn about the organization's risk and the organization's risk tolerance. And when we understand the organization's risk and exposure, we can start thinking about the types of protection we can provide. Now, in order to do that, we're going to have to examine their business processes because we don't want to break something with our security. We're going to have to examine, for example, the way the employees do their jobs, because we don't, which is part of the business processes, but may not be part of it completely, because we don't want to break the employee's ability to do their job. So in order to figure that out, that's probably 80 to 100 conversations, which is going to take 3 or 6 months that you'll have to do with various people that are key stakeholders to get their information. Now, at that point, after collecting information for a couple of months, you're going to be at this point be in a position where you're going to bring your team in, and your team's going to evaluate what they have, because you'll probably have some documentation, but it probably won't be good enough, and you're going to need a real picture. And because you may not get enough from the SOC and other people what they tell you, so you're going to have to dive deep. You're typically going to do some more investigations, maybe for a month or so, or maybe 2. Then you're going to go back to the client and you're going to ask, is this correct? Does what we found sound right to you? And they're going to say yes. So when we've got that, we're going to now take our architecture team and we're going to create the architecture itself. And that may mean we need an IAM architect, for example, with us, and we might need other people with us, some engineers, different perspectives with us on our team. They're going to be part of our team. And we're going to together work to design that. Now we're going to present that design back to the client. They're going to bring it back to us. We're going to present it back, integrate their feedback. And this process will go on for a period of time. At that point, we'll typically design our architectural contracts, any MOUs that we have going on, anything like that. Respond to any RFPs, assuming there was an RFP associated with the architecture. Create any kind of governance structure that we need. Create any kind of security policy. Create any kind of incident response procedures, disaster recovery plans, business continuity plans. And that's it. We go on a new project or a new architecture. So the key is predominantly a business set of skill. So the CXO relevancy, and it won't take as much training here as a car cost, the ability to connect to the C-suite and the board and speak to them about what they want is going to be critical for the role. You're going to have to know business almost as good as if you have an MBA. And that's why we obviously teach business skills in our program. We teach all these skills in our program. You're going to have to know how to manage stakeholders, because that's probably 60% of your job is stakeholder management. You're going to have to know how to sell the solution to the client. Now, selling a car to someone might be, imagine how you're going to feel in this car with the breeze flowing down your throat. I don't know. But when you sell something like this is a different kind of sales. In this particular kind of sales, you're going to have to build a business case. You're going to have to show an ROI model that you've created and show why this solution will actually benefit the business. So those kind of sales skills, exercising influence, how do you sell $1 billion thing, not how do you sell a $100,000 thing? Now, we will have to give presentations at the interview. You'll be giving presentations in the role, presentations to the board, the C-suite technical stakeholders, conferences, executive briefings, what have you. So you'll have to have good presentation skills. You'll have to have good executive presence. Now, my executive presence, I know, costs more than a Honda in terms of training, because before that, it was, hi, today, we're going to talk about this. And then afterwards, I had the presence to be able to walk in and command the room. You have to have that, because you're going to be advising executives. And if they don't see you as a peer executive, they just won't communicate with you. So you're also going to have some good negotiation skills. Now, when we get into the tech, it's not like the CCNA, and this is the same reason, and this is going to be the same as for the person that asked the question about sales. You're now going to have to learn a new set of things. You're going to have to learn risk management. And risk management, I consider, cataloging the systems, cataloging the data, cataloging the applications, looking at the threats that exist out there, the weaknesses in the systems or vulnerabilities in the system, and the potential impact if one threat were to occur. How would that actually occur if it was realized? Now, at that point, we have to basically prioritize risk. Which risks do we mediate? Which risks do we transfer? Which risks do we accept? And then ultimately, we're going to be trying to design some kind of control. So the risk management piece is going to be a big component of it. Now, even from a network security perspective, the CCNA doesn't go deep enough because the CCNA is not going to get into very significant amounts of network access controls. It will get into some packet filters and basic firewalls. It will talk about some basic network segmentation like VLANs, but it's not going to get really deep into network microsegmentation like private VLANs and layer 2 access lists and rate limiting and traffic shaping, which is something we would do on security. And it's not going to really get deep into encryption protocols. Now, you also have to know some data security. When I think data security, I think things like data classification, data privacy, things like obfuscation, tokenization, anonymization, pseudonymization. Those are kind of things you need to think about. How do you make sure that the data isn't good? So the thing that the bank account doesn't change, for example. How do you keep data from leaving the system? Data loss prevention kind of thing. So those types of things. So what's your data lifecycle management? So those types of things I think of in data. And that's typically what goes into a security architect's world. Now, how do we help that organization secure their systems? From an application security perspective, maybe there's code checks, or we make sure that the applications have things like input validation or secure session management. Now, there'll be a lot of IAM in our world, especially if we're in cloud computing with weaker perimeters. Identity will have to become the new perimeter. So whether we'll be getting involved in federated identity and access management and single sign-on and cloud access security brokers and context-aware IAM, or what kind of authentication mechanism we use based on the strengths and weaknesses. That's what we do as security architects, and that's why this stuff is fun. I mean, it's fun. Little involved in security, physical security, like the building itself. We teach all these things, so don't worry about it. Or whether it's a fence, did you use a guard? What kind of fire suppression to use? So those types of things. And well, there's a bit of cryptography. So, we have to know a fair amount of symmetric and asymmetric cryptography and digital signatures and the types of cryptography and their strengths and weaknesses, and how you ensure integrity with things like hashing. So those kind of fun things. And security frameworks like Zero Trust. And of course, how do we design that? That's what we do as security architects. Now, the difference between a CCNA, CCNP, and CCIE, which still won't prepare someone for a security architect role, is they're all about how to build it. The architect role is more about how to design it. So you can't learn architecture from hands-on. You have to learn architecture for design. And that's why you see the people that design the shopping malls and the buildings, the architects never build the properties, because what it takes to build a property is completely different than what it takes to actually design the property. Hope that helps. But you can definitely get it with the right skills. You just have to have the right skills. Don't worry about the experience piece, the skills. You have a decade of sales experience with companies like Nespresso, KitchenAid, and Philips. How do you transfer those skills? So, assuming you are actually dealing with corporate to corporate. So, for example, how do you sell Philips products to the Bed Bath & Beyonds? How do you sell Philips to the Wilson-Sonomas? How do you sell it like that? That kind of sales experience is going to translate very well. Now, if it's personal sales experience, selling to the people themselves, that will still be helpful, but not as helpful. So why am I saying this? What comes in an account manager, account executive type position? Well, for one thing, you definitely have C-level communications. Because in order to get somebody to buy something or sell something at scale, you've had to reach the C-suite. So that level, if you've done that, of CXO relevance is going to help you and help you dramatically. Now, most sales reps that I know how to write for executives. How do I take a 40-page document, summarize it in a page or two, and then show that to the client? That will help you. You may, depending upon the level of sales that you're in, have to provide a business case. If you are not, don't worry about it. Now, I can tell you, if you're selling into a client, there's a lot of stakeholders that you need to speak to get their support and buy-in, and we have to do that as stakeholder management dramatically. Now, you may have even had to manage vendors and people that you're actually working with and partners, so that kind of vendor management and partner management will be hugely beneficial for you. If you've been in sales, you typically know how to start with a big question and narrow it down to smaller questions to find what you're doing. that skill will be hugely relevant. And you might often have some business acumen. Now, why do I say that? Let me give you some examples. So Al was a student of mine, and I'm very proud of Al. Al came to me, he took our course, and about a year after our course, he was working at Deloitte as a senior solutions architect. Now he's working as a VP of architecture somewhere else, and it's only been a couple of years. And why was that? The sales really helped him. I had a student, Jermaine, another great example. Jermaine used to have a landscaping business. He sold landscaping gear. Now, Jermaine was really smart, really, really funny, and I became great friends with Jermaine. Now, he was in our program for about 8 months, and he had offers from every major company you can think of. Well, Al Sagana was another good one. Came straight to us 8 months later. He skipped the whole cloud architect role and went straight into the, enterprise architect role at JP Morgan Chase and Bank. But it's any of these roles. For example, Jennifer was a mental health tech, and poof, she made it easily to JP Morgan Chase and a solutions architect in about 6 months. Camille was actually a nurse practitioner, and she joined us in about 9 months. She's a director of architecture somewhere. So any of those roles where you have to elicit information is definitely a strategic advantage. The only thing that's different is you just typically, in those cases, have to learn the technology, how the technology architecturally fits together, like which solutions and how would you create the solutions, and a little bit about how to answer the technical questions. But the salespeople are typically the fastest because of that reason. And the software developers are typically the last, but everybody gets there. And the reason I say the last is there's only one thing that we don't really typically look at in any way as an architect role is code. Now, we might think about how an application would be structured, but we don't typically think about code. So that's the hardest one, because if somebody came from networking, at least they know the networking piece, which might be 5% of the job. If someone came in from sales, they might know 50% of the job. Someone came in from management consulting, they might know 60 or 70% of the job already, because enterprise architecture is a lot like management consulting. So it really depends on there. But the jobs that are most like an architect role are a physician, where basically we go in, we ask a lot of questions, we put it through our knowledge base of things that we know, we make a diagnosis and build a plan. An attorney, same thing. They look at what the situation is, they look at what the evidence is, they look at what the legal precedent is, and they build a legal strategy. Architect does the same thing. Okay, business, what's your risk? What's your exposure? Let me filter that with everything that I've seen after an investigation. Here's your strategy. So those three roles just generally go together because they're actually the same role in just different titles. And most people don't have those roles. But account planning, what you're doing in sales, that's actually a good background. You would do really well. And the people that sell themselves best also get the best interviews. So love to see you in a webinar. I love the sales background. And that's why you always hear me talk about sales. Because at the end of the day, let's say you have the best architecture in the world. You've had a team work on it. You've had $50,000, $200,000 a year people working on your team for the last year, which costs some money. If you can't convince the client to adopt the solution that you've recommended, not only is there no sale and the company that you work for wasted a lot of money, but more importantly, you can't help your client get to their goals. So sales is one of the most critical skills in life, and definitely here. Jack Bench, to which extent can you learn on the job? 3 years and you've always scratched the surface of automation and DevOps tools. So let me tell you my approach. And I'm serious about this. And if you've ever read the book, Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, it was a very old book. There was one lesson in that book that I really loved, and it changed the way I live my life. I read it as a kid. My uncle from the Marine Corps gave it to me. He gave me a whole bunch of Marine books to read, and he said, I want you to read this too. And in that book, Napoleon Hill said you have two choices. You can try to get the lowest entry-level job you can and learn on the job, or you can get a great education and start midway through. A mid-career role is like a solutions architect. And I'm going to personally tell you what I've done, what I did. So I wanted to become a network engineer a little 25 years ago, and I went and learned all the wrong things, but it was okay. So I got a CCNA, a CCNP, a CCDP, MCSC, and a Microsoft Certified Professional Certification. Now, when I was done that, I found out that no one really wanted what I had. Now, at that point, I had taken two $10,000 or an $11,000, a $10,000, and a $5,000 boot camp, which is $26,000. Now, when I couldn't get hired with that, I called 50 recruiters. Now, when I spoke to the 50 recruiters, I asked them, if you had a network engineer that was so good that a hiring manager would have to hug them and hire them on the spot because they loved them so much, what would those attributes be? Now, I'm going to tell you what I did next. I then just built a plan to learn all those things. And what did I do? I rented a rack from CC Bootcamp. Going back to 2000, it was $200 a day in the time. It's much cheaper. And I did that every Saturday and Sunday for the next 4 months. 4 months later, I had a six-figure job, and this is back in 2000. 3 months after that, I had a CCA, and I doubled that salary. I was able to pay that nearly $40,000 that I borrowed from my brother and my father-in-law and my best friend because I didn't have it, and maxed out my credit cards to do it overnight. And that's when that's when my salary started to rise. So I took the Napoleon Hill approach, think and grow rich, and I've spent $300,000, or I've had a $300,000 education because of it. And I was able to retire when I was 34. So what can you learn on the job? A little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here. And the only things that you can typically learn on the job are the how-to stuff. Now, I'm not saying that's not an option, but you have to look at the opportunity cost of your time. You have to look at how long it's going to take for you to get into a bigger position. And you have to look at, is that worth it for you? Now, the answer for me was, whoa, way. What I'm really concerned to do is go build my life into the best way that I could. Now, if you had a job and then you started doing additional training while you had the job, you might, in 1 year of training, get the equivalent of 15 years worth of just doing stuff along the way. And if you're able to do that and accelerate your career 15 years along the way, it's worth it. So I can tell you, I had that first six-figure job. I doubled it, about a year later, less than a year later. And then 4 years later, I had a job that paid me far more than that. Now for that additional job, here's what I did. I'm not going to joke, not joking about it. I did an MBA. Company paid for a percentage of it. And I did a lot of executive training. I hired an executive coach on my own, took some executive and sales courses there. And then ultimately got a job that paid me more than I could ever imagine. So I'm not a fan of learning on the job. I'm just not. And, and the way I say this is one of my best friends is this guy, Todd. Todd is a yoga instructor. He's a massage therapist, and he's got a passion for anatomy. And, it always amazes me when I see him, how good his knowledge of anatomy is. I mean, it's as good as mine. And he says, Mike, it surprises me that you were able to learn all that anatomy in the 6 months in school, and it took me a lifetime to learn. And for me, it's there. So again, I'm a medical professional before I went into tech. Where I come from, you have to learn everything before you do your job, because if you make a mistake as a physician or a nurse practitioner, you can kill somebody. So for me, I had to be prepped for it. But that's really the way I view it. I invest in myself. I think you're the best investment in the world. Give up some meals at restaurant, give up some cable for 6 months if you have to fund your training. But I want to see you in a position 2 years from now that's double than the place you're in now, and 4 years from now that's potentially double that. And the only way to get there, to accelerate that, is to really invest in you. We'd be happy to do it. There's MBA programs out there. Just invest in you. Hi, Mike. Are there any certifications for AI architects? How do they continue to improve their knowledge base? So you got to remember, you will never learn anything about architecture in a certification. Never. And let's take TOGAF. And I love TOGAF. I think it is a great enterprise architecture framework. Let's say you do the entire TOGAF certification and you've learned the phases. Phase 1, preliminary phase, identify this. Phase 2, phase A, do this. Phase B, so what? What you learned were the phases, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And TOGAF is even great, and they say create an architectural repository that has these documents. But here's what TOGAF doesn't teach you. How to do any of the things that exist in any of those phases. So what is an architectural framework like TOGAF? Well, let's say you have two different physicians. Physician 1 is like my wife. She's internal medicine or cardiology. She's done both. She starts with the head, eyes, nose, throat, neck, lungs, heart, and she works her way down. Now, me, I spent most of my time in musculoskeletal medicine. So what do I look at first is the big toe. If that big toe doesn't have 60 degrees of extension, there's going to be a problem. Then I look at the ankle. Then I look at the knees. Then I look at the hips. And I look at ankle mobility and knee stability and hip mobility and hopefully lumbar stability and thoracic mobility. So I start from the bottom up because that's the kinetic chain. So what TOGAF really is it's saying, hey, everybody, just start from the head and work your way to the feet. And that way there's no variances between the way my wife would do something versus the way I would do something. So that's all there's there. So the AWS Solutions Architect Professional has no architecture on it. It has systems administration on it. Same thing for the Azure Solutions Architect Expert. How do you become a better architect? Well, you make yourself better at what architects do. You increase your business acumen so you can create better solutions to your clients' problems. You increase your stakeholder management skills so you can make sure that you don't miss anything that any of the stakeholders need, which are going to get your designs accepted better, faster, and be better supported. You can make sure ahead of time that you identify exactly the problem you solve. Learn how to truly map out that business architecture and truly optimize that architecture. And now you're solving big problems. So we either determine where we're going to focus. If our goal is to enhance our clients' performance best, we're typically going to have to focus on business. That's why I did a second MBA, because I did one when I was young. That's why I went through probably $100,000 of leadership training, executive type training after that to become better. Now, TAW 3000, you may notice that CEOs don't walk around and say, I'm certified. Chief information officers don't walk around and say, I'm certified. So when we get into any executive position, an AI architect position, an average one might pay $200,000, but a principal or distinguished one might be $600,000 or $700,000. So when you start looking at that, you're seeing executives. So all the stuff that junior level people do don't work at the executive level. Now, let's say you're an AI architect. Well, I'd be consistently keeping up to date with what AMD is doing on the compute side, what NVIDIA is doing on the compute side, what FPGAs and traditional ASICs are being done on the compute side. I'd be looking and constantly staying attuned of what types of LLMs are being used and why, what types of small language models are being used and why, what are the new best practices in data hygiene, what are the lessons learned, whatever. I'd be focused on that. So not in a certification on you. So there's that. Now, unfortunately, there's an AWS AI practitioner that will basically give you the AWS vocabulary that they created for their own stuff. But quite frankly, you're not going to walk to a client and use AWS terms. You're going to talk about what they're actually doing in a terms and a language that people actually understand. So, there's no real architecture certifications. I wish there were, but there are definitely ways to become a better architect. And how do you get promoted? You become better at your job. What's the best sales job to go for if you want to sell product? Is it sales engineering or consider using Coursera? Well, I can tell you to not use Coursera. Don't waste your time with Udemy or any of that nonsense, because a year from now, we'll be having the same conversation and we're going to have to start you from scratch. So you're going to have to get quality training. So there's basically 3 sales type roles that you could do in sales. One is the account manager. The account manager is a very high paying role. It is a wonderful role. For the most part, it pays about the same as the architect role. Now, this is a role of executiveness. I'm typically looking for the MBA and a global account manager or a super high paid account manager. I'm looking for the level of je ne sais quoi or gravitas or presence you have. I'm looking for knowing the person to know what to say, when to say it, how to say it, to know the perfect use of the forks, to have perfect etiquette, what have you. And that is definitely there. What I would say, if that's where you want to go into that role, I would start looking at an MBA. I would start getting additional executive presence training, sales training, leadership training, and I would get some, and I would work with one of the people that are good at sales. I personally like the Dale Carnegie Institute, but then again, I lived in Princeton, New Jersey for a long time. But I would say combine those things together, and that'll move you into one of these roles. Now, the only problem with that role is they're commission-based roles, so you can have some great years and not so great years. The next role that I would talk about is really the architect, where you're working as a solutions architect. And in that case, what you do is you design, you present, and you sell a solution. Now, these roles are different than sales roles. A sales role might have a low base pay of $50,000 or $60,000, but could have $150,000 of commission. Now, by comparison, the solutions architect role might pay a little differently. It may have a base of $125,000 and a bonus structure of $75,000 or something to that effect, because it's more of a corporate plan. So the pay is going to be effectively the same. Architects can typically earn a little more, but it's basically there. Now, with the solutions architect role, you're very safe because you now combine sales skills, usually not quite as good as the sales execs, and you now have the technology strategy. So that makes you kind of a unicorn, which is good. Now, if you're like me and you took just as much sales training as the sales executives that are in these roles, you're really going to do good, because now you become the perfect unicorn of a sales rep and a technology strategist in the same person. And there's plenty of chief architect roles at $500,000 plus for architects that are doing these things, that are quite good at, that are quite good in front of the board. So that's something that I would do. And, if that's the case, we could easily train you to get there, and it would take us about a year. Now, the next role is the sales engineer. And I've been a sales engineer for a short period of time. I don't typically like the role, but I think it's a great role for people doing. I just don't enjoy it personally. Now, the sales engineer is, instead of that solutions architect being 75% sales and 25% tech, now I've got the sales engineer that's kind of 50% sales or 40% sales and say 60% tech. So for that sales engineer, they're going to get a lower salary because they're more on the tech side. They're going to have to get extra techie. They're going to have to know how to configure the stuff, because the sales engineer may have to touch the technology where the solutions architect won't. And, sales engineers typically get paid less to do that, potentially significantly less. So for people that like to touch the technology, the sales engineer role is probably the best one they can move into, a sales engineer, then a principal sales engineer, for people that love to touch the tech. I personally think the sweet spot is the cloud architect, the solutions architect, the enterprise architect, the AI architect. And why is that? Because you get all the benefits of a sales role, including the salary, but you've got a lot more stability. And I tend to like that. Plus, I like being more of the trusted advisor, so I enjoy it. But I've done sales, and sales is a fine thing too. But that's what I would do. Why don't you come to the webinar tomorrow, if you can? We'll talk architecture roles. And I'm happy to dive deep into sales or there. But you're going to need to get, for these kind of sales jobs, they're an executive thing. So it's more about executive skills. And we can talk much more about them tomorrow. Are there any others for me? If not, I might actually leave a few minutes early today, which never happens, since my cat Cindy has been staring at me. So if you've got a question, please bring it in. I can stay up till 4. But otherwise, if it's a little quiet, it's totally fine. I'm happy to do some other things as well. Any other questions for me? And let me answer the next one. No. Where should you start as a sales engineer, or would sales be suitable for long-term growth? I would only start as a sales engineer if I wanted to be an engineer. Otherwise, I would start as a solutions architect, as a sales rep, based upon exactly the career that I truly desire. Fearless Conversations. That would be the way I do it. Focus on exactly what you want. Build the map to exactly what you want. Follow that map or that plan that you created until you get there. And there's literally speaking nothing you can't do. So tomorrow, I'd hope so many of you could actually join me on the How to Become a Security Architect webinar. And we'll speak for about 45 minutes. And then after that, we'll answer any questions. And I mean, you want to, if it's questions on a cloud architect career, I'll answer it. Questions about an architect career, I'll answer it. If you're going on interviews and not getting good results, you want to know why, and you want, I'll give you a 3 or 4 question interview, and I'll tell you exactly what the problem is. And I'll make the recommendations on what you can do for it. Can't imagine why you keep going on interviews and they got crazy technical out of nowhere. I'm happy to peruse your CV and your LinkedIn profile and tell you exactly why that's going on. So make this your time. It is completely free from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. tomorrow. And Tyron from my team, he's over there in Cape Town, South Africa, posted it for you all to see. So we have that. We have some free guides in the description of this video to help you with various architecture careers, including a free interview guide. Sign up for some. They'll be emailed to you. They're all free. If you had a good time or learned something, maybe give it a like, subscribe, and hit the bell to be notified of new videos to help you in your architecture career. And take advantage of our 50% off summer savings. And take advantage of that, and let's get started building your architecture career. It was so nice to see everyone today. Thank you so much for coming. And we'll get that. Actually, no, one question popped in. So how do I handle experience questions? So let me tell you what experience means. Well, and so on my first job, cloud computing, and by the way, every job from a waiter or a waitress or front desk receptionist, everything wants 5 to 10 years of experience in a job description, which is, don't worry about that. So the first thing is, what do we really care about as hiring managers? Your competency, or your ability to do the job or ability to not do the job. Now, I can tell, by the way, when I ask you a question, it'll become very obvious to me whether you can do the job or whether you can't do the job. So there's that. And if you're capable of doing the job, we can hire you. And if you're not capable, here's what we're going to say. We're going to say, come back when you have more experience, or I'm sorry, we can't hire you with experience. Experience is a proxy for, I don't want to hire you and I can't tell you why. And let me explain to you how I learned this the first time. So when I got my first job 25 years ago, maybe it was actually almost a little more than 25 years. It's embarrassing to say at this point. And I'd been a network engineer and I'd been on the job for, I don't know, a month. My manager, the vendor, says, Mike, I want you to interview people. You can dive deeper than most of my team. Dive deep. So the first person came in on an interview, and I looked at the person's resume, and the person's resume had some very impressive things about IPsec encryption. And this was like a year after IPsec encryption was invented, so I was going to test this person. So I asked this person to talk about the benefits of IPsec, and he said, it's encrypted. I'm like, okay, but what are the actual benefits? And he went blank, other than it's encrypted. And I said, talk to me about the difference between symmetric and asymmetric encryption and which I would use and where and why. He went, huh? And I said, tell me how IPsec sets up a connection. And he couldn't answer it. So first thing on his resume was large amounts of experience with IPsec tunnels and encryption, and he couldn't answer it. So then I decided to be nice to the kid, and I said, could you tell me what you know best? And he said, I know OSPF best, Mike. And I said, okay, could you talk to me about the states of the OSPF finite state machine? And he couldn't. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll help you. Init, xstart, to see if he would know to go to exchange, loading, and full, and he had no idea where to begin. I said, well, you said you were an OSPF expert. Well, I did a lab one time. And I said, okay, last chance. Could you tell me the one thing that you really know so we can talk about it? No. He gave me some fake thing. I asked him a question that fell through. So I walked him to the door, to the elevators, and I said, you know, when you learn networking, come back. Now, I didn't know at the time, but my manager, Devendra, saw me walk this person out 6 minutes into an interview. And Devendra came over to me and said, Mike, what happened? You're supposed to spend 15 minutes with the guy. I said, well, He lied about knowing networking. He faked absolutely everything that was here. So instead of saying, you a liar, I can't hire you, I basically said, come back when you learn networking. So the vendor says, come sit in my office. And the vendor says, Mike, someone comes in for an interview, we have to give them a good experience. We don't want them to hate us in the future. So when you interview someone and they can't do the job, or you don't want to hire them for any reason, just say, come back when you have more experience. So that is the key. The experience thing is meaningless. Pierre D., college student, 24 years old, hired by LeaseWeb as a solutions architect as his first job. Daniel Bosu, 20 years old, didn't even finish high school, didn't have a GED, hired by JP Morgan Chase after our training. Arun, working at Home Depot, hired by TELUS as a cloud solutions architect after about 9 months in our training. Didn't matter. Jeffrey, a geologist, hired by Kalian in about 8 months as a solutions architect. Last job, geologist. Jennifer, mental health tech, hired straight by JP Morgan Chase. Delroy Batt was an emergency medical technician hired by CDW as a security architect. It's not hard to get a job when you actually have the knowledge, but it's competency we desire. Now, you might be wondering what's going on with the ridiculous job descriptions. Why don't all these job descriptions say something? Here's the good news. We hiring managers didn't write them. I've never seen an actual job description in my life that ever made sense. And why is that? When I want to hire someone, I will, what I'll do is I'll call HR, and then HR will write a job description about a job they didn't know. That's why your job descriptions look silly. Imagine you decided to write a job for a description for a cardiothoracic surgeon or a neurosurgeon or an orthopedic surgeon. Could you do that accurately? The answer is no. That's why the job descriptions are messed up. But it's not about your experience. It never is. It is about your competency. It is about knowing that you know the trade-offs, that you don't act or think like a certification exam, which is full of all the stuff that you wouldn't really want to do in the real world. That's what they're looking for. So don't worry about it. Now, if I asked that person, when I asked them about OSPF and I said, okay, could you describe the finite state machine? And they said, absolutely, OSPF, like BGP, uses a finite state machine. In that finite state machine, it starts as init, as it's getting initialized. Then it goes to exchange as it starts to send LSAs. Then it moves into loading, where we start taking the LSAs and moving into them. And then we go into basically a full or something like that, where at this point we've populated our databases when they're now in our routing table. So you've got to be able to explain it to me. And if you explained that to me, I'd be impressed. And when I said, could you tell me the LSAs that exist in OSPF? If that person said, well, we have an LSA type 1 that's generated by the routers themselves on a broadcast multi-access segment. And we have an LSA type 2 that's created by the designated routers and backup designated routers on a broadcast multi-access segment. And we have a type 3 LSA that is generated across areas. They're called the summary LSA. And we have a type 4 LSA that tells us how to reach our autonomous system board or router, which is a router that's redistributing something from outside the OSPF domain. And we have a type 5 LSA that is external, meaning it got redistributed from another domain. Now, that person I wouldn't care about his experience. I'd hire that person because they proved to me they were competent. So kind of hope that actually helps example that. Don't worry about it. Worry about being great. If you're great, you're fine. Nafuli was a student of mine. I trained him for about a year. He's left us about 6 months ago because he got a job as chief technology officer in Manchester, United Kingdom. It's not about your background, not about your experience. It's all about what can you actually do. Not what you think you could do, but what you can actually do. Come join us tomorrow on the webinar. I hope to see you there. And that way I can help you and show you how you can demonstrate some of these things. Love to meet you. So drop the link to the webinar one last time, Tyron. And I hope to see so many of you on the webinar. Like I said, if you had a good time, maybe give it a like, maybe tell a friend about our channel because we love being here with you. Want to help any way we can. Take care, everyone. And I hope to see so many of you in the webinar or another video.